I refused to go on a family vacation with my sister and her controlling husband, so she uninvited me from our dream trip. Months later, she confessed the dark truth about her marriage. I, 28F, have always been close to my older sister Esther, 31F. Growing up, we were thick as thieves. Our parents worked long hours at their small business, so Esther and I often relied on each other for company and support. We shared a room until I was 14, and even then, we'd spend hours talking late into the night about our dreams and fears. Esther was always the more outgoing one. She was popular in school, involved in every club, and had a new boyfriend every few months. I was quieter, preferring books and art to parties and dating. But despite our differences, we always had each other's backs. When I was bullied in middle school for my braces and glasses, Esther stood up for me. And when Esther's high school boyfriend cheated on her at prom, I was the one who held her while she cried all night. After high school, I moved to the city for college while Esther stayed in our hometown to help with the family business. It was the first time we'd been apart for more than a few days, and it was hard. We called each other almost every night that first year, and I'd come home every other weekend. As time went on, we settled into a routine of weekly calls and monthly visits. During college, I threw myself into my studies and made a small group of close friends. Dating wasn't really on my radar. I went on a few first dates, but nothing ever clicked. Esther, on the other hand, had a series of serious relationships. She'd always introduce me to her boyfriends, eager for my approval. I liked most of them well enough, but none of them ever felt quite right for her. About 2 years ago, Esther started dating Mark, 33M. From the beginning, something felt off. The first time I met him, he barely acknowledged me, spending the entire dinner talking about his job and finance. When I tried to join the conversation, he'd either ignore me or give one-word responses. I chalked it up to nerves and tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. But as time went on, things didn't improve. Whenever I'd visit home, Mark would always be there, monopolizing Esther's time. Our sister nights became less frequent, and when we did hang out, Mark would often call or text incessantly. Esther seemed happy, though, so I kept my concerns to myself. They got married last year in a small ceremony. I was her maid of honor, but it felt like a hollow title. Mark's sister handled most of the traditional maid of honor duties, while I was left feeling like a glorified guest. Still, I plastered on a smile and did my best to make Esther's day special. Last month, Esther called me excitedly about a sister's trip she was planning to Greece. We had always talked about going there together, ever since we watched Mamma Mia as teenagers and fell in love with the stunning scenery. We'd spend hours looking at pictures of Santorini and dreaming about drinking wine on a balcony overlooking the Aegean Sea. I was thrilled when Esther brought it up. It felt like a chance to reconnect, to recapture some of that closeness we'd lost. I immediately requested time off work and started looking at flights. We spent hours on the phone discussing all the places we wanted to see and things we wanted to do. We even started a shared Pinterest board to collect ideas. Yesterday, Esther messaged me saying that Mark would be joining us on the trip. She said he's always wanted to see Greece too, and since they're newlyweds, it would be like a delayed honeymoon for them. I was shocked and honestly pretty upset. This wasn't what we had planned at all. I called Esther to discuss it. I tried to keep my tone neutral as I explained that I had been looking forward to spending time just with her, like we used to. I reminded her of all our late-night talks about this trip, how it was supposed to be our special sister adventure. I also gently mentioned that I don't really feel comfortable around Mark for extended periods. I assured her it wasn't personal, just that we have very different personalities and I find it hard to relax around him. Esther's response caught me off guard. She got defensive and accused me of being selfish. She said that Mark is family now and I need to accept that. She brought up how she allowed me to be her maid of honor, even though Mark wanted his sister to do it, as if it was some great favor to me rather than an honor I'd always assumed I'd have as her only sister. I was hurt by this. I didn't realize my role in her wedding was just her doing me a favor. I thought back to all the times I'd supported Esther through breakups and bad days, all the times I'd dropped everything to be there for her. It felt like none of that mattered anymore. I told Esther that I understood things are different now that she's married, but I didn't think it was fair to completely change our plans without discussing it with me first. I suggested that maybe it would be better if I didn't go on the trip at all. I could tell she was getting upset, so I tried to soften it by saying we could plan a different sister's day when they got back. Esther's reaction was explosive. She accused me of trying to ruin everything, of being dramatic and selfish. She said I was jealous of her relationship with Mark and that I needed to grow up and stop clinging to her. Her words felt like a slap in the face. This wasn't the sister I knew, the one who had always been my fiercest defender and closest confidant. The call ended with Esther hanging up on me. Since then, I've received a barrage of texts from her, alternating between guilt-tripping me and accusing me of trying to come between her and Mark. Some of our mutual friends have also reached out, saying Esther told them I was trying to sabotage her marriage. I feel like I'm in a twilight zone. How did a conversation about a vacation turn into this? Part of me wonders if I am being unreasonable. Maybe I am holding on to our past relationship too tightly. But another part of me feels like I'm losing my sister, like she's becoming someone I don't recognize. I've never been in a long-term relationship myself, so maybe I just don't understand how things change when you get married. But I always thought that marriage was about adding to your family, not replacing it. I'm worried that if I give in on this, it'll set a precedent where Mark is always included in our sister time. The idea of being a third wheel on what was supposed to be our trip just sounds miserable to me. I can already imagine Mark dominating the conversations, Esther deferring to him on every decision, and me feeling like an outsider in what was supposed to be a special sister bonding experience. But now I'm wondering if I'm overreacting and being selfish. Am I the asshole for not wanting to go on this trip anymore? Should I just suck it up and go along with the new plans for Esther's sake? Or should I stand my ground and risk further damaging our relationship? So, Reddit, AIDA for not wanting to go on this trip anymore? Update 1. Thank you all for your responses. I've read through everything and really appreciate the different perspectives. I wanted to give an update on the situation. After my post, I didn't hear from Esther for a few days. The silence was deafening. We've never gone this long without speaking, not even during our biggest fights in the past. I found myself constantly checking my phone, hoping for a message or a missed call. I even drove by our parents' house, where Esther and Mark are currently living while they save up for their own place, but I couldn't bring myself to go in. Then, last night, Esther finally called. As soon as I heard her voice, I could tell she'd been crying. We had a long, emotional conversation that lasted well into the early hours of the morning. Esther started by apologizing for springing the change of plans on me. She admitted she should have discussed it with me first and that she had handled the situation poorly. Then she opened up about some things that had been going on behind the scenes. Apparently, Mark's family has been giving Esther a hard time since the wedding. They feel like she doesn't make enough effort to be part of their family traditions or spend time with them. Esther explained that she's been feeling guilty about this, and that including Mark in our trip was her way of trying to show that she values his family too. I listened as Esther poured out her frustrations and fears. She talked about how she's struggling to balance her roles as a wife, a daughter-in-law, a daughter, and a sister. She confessed that she's been feeling overwhelmed and that she misses how simple things used to be between us. As she spoke, I felt a mix of emotions. On one hand, I was relieved to hear that Esther was still the person I knew and loved. On the other hand, I was hurt that she hadn't felt she could share these struggles with me earlier. When Esther finished, I took a deep breath and opened up too. I told her how I've been feeling left out since she got married, how I miss our one-on-one time and the easy rapport we used to have. I explained that my reluctance to go on the trip with Mark wasn't about not accepting him as family, but about mourning the loss of something that was supposed to be just for us. Esther listened quietly, occasionally sniffling. When I finished, she said she hadn't realized I felt that way, and promised to make more effort to maintain our relationship. She apologized for taking me for granted and for letting other pressures come between us. We talked about the Greece trip, and Esther suggested a compromise. She and Mark will go for 2 weeks, and I'll join them for the second week. This way, they get some honeymoon time, and we still get our sister time. It's not ideal, but I think it could work. We even laughed a bit as we started replanning, talking about all the places we'd show Mark and the secret adventures we'd have just the two of us. However, as the conversation went on, I could sense there was still some tension. Esther mentioned that Mark was hurt by my reluctance to include him. She hinted that he thinks I don't like him, which, if I'm being honest, isn't entirely untrue. I tried to explain that it's not personal. We just don't click. But Esther got defensive again. She started listing all of Mark's good qualities and the ways he supports her, as if she was trying to convince herself as much as me. This part of the conversation left me feeling uneasy. I'm worried this issue with Mark will continue to cause problems. Esther and I have always been each other's main support system, and it's hard adjusting to this new dynamic. Part of me wonders if I should just try harder to bond with Mark for Esther's sake, but another part feels like I shouldn't have to force a relationship. The call ended on a somewhat positive note, with both of us agreeing to make more effort. Esther suggested we all have dinner together soon to clear the air. I'm nervous about it, but I agreed for her sake. As I lay in bed after the call, unable to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that while we had made progress, there were still unresolved issues bubbling under the surface. The Esther I talked to last night was more like the sister I remember, but there were moments when I could hear the influence of the person she had been during our previous argument. Defensive, quick to take Mark's side, reluctant to fully acknowledge my feelings. The trip is still a few months away, so we have time to figure things out. I'm trying to be optimistic, but I'm also trying to be realistic. This isn't going to be fixed overnight, and I need to be prepared for the possibility that our relationship might never be quite the same as it was before. I'm still not 100% comfortable with how things turned out, but I'm trying to be more understanding of Esther's position. At the same time, I'm realizing I need to be clearer about my own boundaries and needs. It's a tricky balance, and I'm not sure how to navigate it yet. Thank you again for all your advice. I'll update again after the dinner if anything significant happens. Wish me luck. I have a feeling I'm going to need it. Update 2. Hello, everyone. I'm back with another update, and unfortunately, things have gotten more complicated. We had the dinner with Esther and Mark last week. I spent the day anxious about it, changing my outfit 3 times and even baking Esther's favorite cookies as a peace offering. When I arrived at their place, Esther greeted me with a hug that felt almost normal, and for a moment I thought everything might be okay. We sat down to dinner, and at first it seemed to go okay. We made small talk about work and the upcoming trip. Esther and I reminisced about some of our childhood adventures, and I tried to include Mark by asking about his family vacations. He answered politely but briefly, always steering the conversation back to himself or Esther. As we were finishing the main course, Mark brought up my initial reluctance to go on the trip with them. His tone was casual, but there was an undercurrent of tension. He said he felt like I didn't consider him family and that I was trying to come between him and Esther. I was. Taken aback by his directness and tried to explain that wasn't the case at all. I said I was just adjusting to the changes in our family dynamic and that I valued my one-on-one time with Esther. I even apologized if I had made him feel unwelcome, hoping to smooth things over. But Mark wasn't satisfied. He scoffed at my explanation and said I needed to grow up and accept that things are different now. He went on a long monologue about how marriage means putting your spouse first and how Esther shouldn't have to choose between her husband and her sister. Throughout this, Esther just sat there silently, pushing food around her plate. When I looked to her for support, she avoided eye contact. I felt completely blindsided and alone. It was like all the progress we'd made in our phone conversation had evaporated. I tried to keep my cool, but I could feel tears pricking at my eyes. I excused myself to the bathroom, where I took a few deep breaths and splashed water on my face. When I came back, Esther was clearing the plates and Mark was on his phone. The rest of the evening passed in awkward small talk, and I left as soon as I could without seeming rude. A few days passed, and I didn't hear from Esther. I sent her a text asking if we could talk about what happened at dinner, but she just replied with a vague, "I'm really busy with work right now, I'll call you later." Then yesterday, she finally called and dropped a bombshell. She said that after thinking about it, she and Mark decided it would be best if I didn't come on the trip at all. She said there was too much tension and it wouldn't be fair to anyone. I was stunned. I reminded her that this trip was originally our idea, something we'd been planning for years. I brought up all the times we'd talked about it, how we'd even started learning a few Greek phrases together. Esther's voice got cold, and she said, "Well, things change. Mark is my priority now. And if you can't accept that, maybe we need some space." The call ended shortly after that, with Esther saying she had to go because Mark was calling her. I sat there for a long time after, trying to process what had just happened. It feels like I'm losing my sister, the person who's been my best friend for as long as I can remember. I don't understand how things escalated so quickly, or why Esther is suddenly taking Mark's side on everything. Part of me wonders if there's more going on that I don't know about. Has Mark been saying things about me when I'm not around? Is Esther having doubts about the marriage and overcompensating? Or am I really the problem here, unable to let go of the past and accept the new reality? I'm devastated and confused. Our parents called earlier asking about the Greece trip. Apparently, Esther told them I had decided not to go because I was too busy with work. I didn't know what to say, so I just went along with it. I hate lying to them, but I also don't want to drag them into this mess. I'm not sure what to do now. Should I try to talk to Esther again? Should I reach out to our parents for help? Or should I just accept that our relationship has changed irrevocably? The thought of losing my sister feels like losing a part of myself, but I also don't know how much more of this emotional whiplash I can take. Any advice would be appreciated. I feel like I'm drowning in a situation I don't fully understand, and I don't know how to find my way back to solid ground. Update 3. Hello, everyone. This will likely be my final update on this situation. After my last post, I took some time to reflect on everything that had happened. I reread old text conversations with Esther, looked through our childhood photo albums, and even dug out the journal I kept in high school. It was a painful journey down memory lane, but it helped me realize something important. Regardless of the outcome, I needed to stand up for myself and my feelings. So, I decided to have one last conversation with Esther. I called her and asked if we could meet in person, just the two of us. To my surprise, she agreed without hesitation. We met at the small cafe where we used to hang out during her college breaks, a neutral ground filled with bittersweet memories. When Esther walked in, I was struck by how tired she looked. There were dark circles under her eyes, and she seemed to have lost weight. As we sat down with our coffees, an awkward silence fell between us. It felt strange to be so uncomfortable with the person I used to be able to talk to about anything. Finally, I took a deep breath and laid everything out. How hurt I was by her actions, how I felt our relationship had changed, and how I didn't understand why she was prioritizing Mark's feelings over our lifelong bond. I talked about how it felt to be excluded from the trip we'd dreamed about for years, and how confused I was by her sudden change in attitude towards me. To my surprise, Esther broke down crying. Through her tears, she confessed that Mark had been pressuring her to distance herself from me and our family. He apparently felt threatened by how close Esther and I were, often complaining that she talked about me too much, or compared their relationship to ours. Esther admitted she'd been going along with it because she was afraid of causing problems in her marriage. As she spoke, Esther revealed more about her relationship with Mark. She told me about how he checks her phone regularly, how he gets upset if she spends too much time talking to me or our parents, and how he's been pushing her to quit her job and start a family even though she's not ready. It was like a dam had broken, and all the things she'd been holding back came flooding out. I was shocked and angry. I told Esther that while I understood marriage requires compromise, it shouldn't mean completely sacrificing other important relationships. I also pointed out that Mark's behavior seemed controlling and potentially problematic. I reminded her of how our parents' marriage worked, how they always supported each other's relationships with family and friends. Esther listened and seemed to really hear me for the first time in months. She agreed that things had gone too far and that she needed to reevaluate her relationship with Mark. She apologized for how she'd treated me and asked if we could work on rebuilding our relationship. We spent hours at that cafe, talking through everything. We cried, we laughed, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I had my sister back. Esther promised to stand up to Mark and set some boundaries in their relationship. She also agreed to talk to our parents about what's been going on. As for the Greece trip, Esther offered to uninvite Mark and go with just me as originally planned. But at this point, I don't think that's a good idea. I told her I think we both need some time and space to process everything. Instead, we've agreed to start with small steps, weekly sister dates, just the two of us, to rebuild our bond. Esther's also promised to talk to Mark about his behavior and possibly consider couples counseling. She seemed nervous about confronting him, which worries me, but I'm trying to be supportive without pushing too hard. I'm cautiously optimistic, but I'm also prepared for the possibility that our relationship may never be quite the same. This whole experience has taught me a lot about standing up for myself and the importance of maintaining my own identity outside of family relationships. As I left the cafe, Esther hugged me tightly and whispered, "I'm sorry I forgot who we were." It was a small moment, but it gave me hope that maybe, just maybe, we can find our way back to each other. I don't know what the future holds, but I feel stronger now. Whatever happens, I know I'll be okay. Thank you all for your support throughout this journey. Your advice and perspectives have been invaluable.